talking about whether either of us would want to go back in time for any reason. In Johnny's case, the answer would be
No.
too adventurous.
Not for me.
Whereas I'm one of those people who's thought about this a lot. Like a lot. There was this point when I obsessively wanted to go back in time, to a very particular moment in time, to fix the past. The facts are pretty standard. I was with a woman, and we needed to decide about our future. So I flew to Alaska for the weekend to visit her. And after talking for 2 days, I finally said that I wasn't ready to be with her. And for a long time after that, I wished I had made the opposite decision, that I had told her yes instead of no. I would sit and pray that I could have that weekend to do over again. I'd picture it all the time. And then, just little by little, there wasn't any big epiphany or anything. I came to see that things were never really right to me, and that they never would have been. It took about 2 years, maybe longer, to understand that. And now she's married, and I'm not, but I'm really happy we're not together. And it makes me realize that I have been time traveling. It's just that I've been traveling into the future at 60 minutes per hour. And maybe that's how we fix the past.
John Cole is one of the producers of our radio show. Jonathan Goldstein is the host of the public radio program and podcast Wiretap, which is distributed in the United States by PRI, Public Radio International, and also available on iTunes. Coming up, a glass of wine that could change everything. That's in a minute. Chicago Public Radio, when our program continues. This podcast of This American Life is supported by Squarespace. If you have a story to tell, whether it's about starting a new business or sharing photos from a recent adventure, Squarespace gives you an all-in-one platform to bring these stories to life online. With modern templates, mobile responsive designs, simple drag-and-drop tools, and 24-hour support, you can create a professional website, portfolio, or online store in just a few minutes. For a free trial, visit squarespace.com/American. This is American Life. So you choose in our program, of course, we choose a theme, bring you different kinds of stories on that theme. Today's show, The Leap. Stories of people taking a huge jump into the unknown. We've arrived at 3 of our program. 3, the wisdom to know the difference. So Nancy Updike has this story about someone considering very big. She might try.
Tina Dupuy has a story she's told dozens of times in front of thousands of people. It's about herself at 13 years old, when she was being told by people around her, "You have a problem." The problem landed her in AA, and started early. She remembers drinking sake when she was 5 years old at a family reunion. At age 12, pouring herself a big glass of tequila at 3 in the morning to drink by herself and watch TV. Kinds of things that can seem cool or no big deal when you're in it, until suddenly they're ruining your life. At a very young age, Tina became what she calls AA famous for telling her story at meetings and AA conferences like this one.
I got sober when I was 13, and for a really long time I thought that was my identity, and that was my thing that was going to make me different from absolutely everybody. Even in young people's meetings, I was like, oh yeah, you're 16, whatever. I got sober when I was 13, and last year at
ACUPA stands for All California Young People in Alcoholics Anonymous.
I was in the room I was staying in, and there was this kid there, and he looked really young, and I was like, wow, how old are you? And he said he's 13, and I was like, wow, how long have you got sober? And he says he has 90 days, and I was like, wow, I got sober when I was 13, I'm cool. And he's like, I got sober when I was 12.
So Tina got AA famous as Tina D, the girl who got sober when she was 13 and could tell the hell out of her story. And if you're wondering, yes, teenagers can be alcoholics. Almost 700,000 teenage alcoholics in the U.S., according to most recent government statistics. AA saved Tina's life by the grace of God, or whatever higher power you choose. She quoted the Big Book, that's the official AA book, so much that people in AA called her Big Book Thumper. It's like a Bible thumper, except the Big Book. And any teenager who shows up at AA today could be handed a Young People in AA pamphlet that starts with Tina's story. That's part 1 of this. Tina from age 13 up to 33. 2 decades sober. At 33, she'd been married for several years. She'd become a columnist and a political her. Keep coming back. Trust your higher power. Everything happens for a reason. After so much turbulence, her life was finally calm. And then an unwelcome and not at all expected thought.
One day it occurred to me that everything doesn't happen for a reason. What it is that everything happens, and then we assign a reason to it.
For someone else, maybe it would be a big deal. For Tina, this was the start of a great, slow unraveling. Next to go was belief in a higher power. And then she became fixated on a dangerous question.
I would wonder, what if? What if I drank? Really, what would happen? But in the Alcoholics Anonymous book, it says, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, go drink. And if you can drink normally, awesome. I'm paraphrasing.
Mm-hmm.
But it says that. It says, this is how you can find out if you're an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
Go drink.
Let's take a minute and consider the scale of what Tina was proposing. Tina had been a full-blown drunk 13 years old. She found AA, and in every AA meeting, the first thing you say out loud to get started is, I'm an alcoholic. Tina had been saying that her entire adult life and all of her adolescence. Asking herself, should I take a drink, was basically asking, should I turn my back on what I believed about myself for 20 years? There's only one reason to entertain a question that immense, which is, you can't help it. Tina had doubted and questioned her way into a process that she could not stop. It was like she'd started restoring a painting, and then realized, I think there's another painting underneath. I want to say one thing, which is that when I interviewed Tina, I saw that a lot of what she's talking about, her rethinking of her story, she's still in the middle of figuring it out right now, today. Tina has a few key anecdotes she's told over the years at AA conferences. I've heard a bunch of recordings of her talking. One story is about a moment when she was 12 with her mom laying down the law. Here's the recording.
She said, I need you in before 6 a.m. so when I go to work, I can know that you're okay. And I was like, look, lady, I don't need to deal with your rules. I'm out of here.
Notice in this anecdote, Tina is the problem. That's how it is in all the recordings. She's rude to her mom, she's self-destructive. It's a classic AA story about admitting bad behavior, taking responsibility for it. Anything else is just excuses. But the questions Tina was having had stirred up the anything else. It made her go back and look at things she hadn't looked at since she was a kid, especially her relationship with her mom.
This is so awkward for me to talk about because I've spent the last 25 years convincing myself that it had nothing to do with that my mommy didn't hug me enough. I don't want anyone to think that I'm blaming my mommy. I also don't want to feel like I'm ripping on her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. A central tenet of AA is taking responsibility, not going on and on about how other people are always the problem. So let me lay out some things. Tina's parents had been part of a new religious movement, which is the current term for what most of us would still call a cult. They moved around a lot when Tina was little, 4 different countries before she was 3 years old. Then her parents left the cult, and her dad was almost entirely out of the picture after that. Home was a constant battle of wills between Tina and her mother, and she was a defiant kid. She talked back, she swore, she cut school, she'd harass her younger brother. The way her mom responded to the bad behavior, as Tina remembers it, was to tell her she was evil, she was rotten. And when Tina was 11, her mother had her committed to a hospital under psychiatric care, sort of a kiddie mental ward. Locked up, a tough love intervention to curb her rebelliousness.
I kind of knew that she was trying to scare the crap out of me, because then I would do what she said. And I knew, I remember being in that elevator and just thinking, she wants me to cry, she wants me to beg, she wants me to bargain, she wants me to apologize, she wants me to say, I will do whatever you say, I'm so sorry, just don't leave me here. And I remember thinking, if I show her that, if I do that, then she wins. And so it was basically like I was calling her bluff.
Not to cry.
Not to cry, but also to go okay, see you later.
Yeah,
whatever.
Not to cry, not to rarely visited her there. I talked to Tina's mom. She didn't remember calling Tina evil, but she did remember and she remembered committing Tina for 30 days to the hospital. She said she was trying to raise two. I went to a family tough love and recommended hospitalizing Tina. Foster care, the group home, is where Tina regularly started going to AA. So one pattern in Tina's AA stories is she's the bad guy, the only bad guy, even though she was a kid. But I noticed another pattern when I was listening to her old recordings of her speeches, which is she never gets drunk in the stories. Here's one of the recordings. Tina's talking about when she went to San Francisco to try and live with her father briefly.
I get on the plane, and I sit next, it's a crowded flight, and I sit next to this poor guy, and I start telling him everything about myself, my entire life story, which wasn't that long, about 15 minutes. I was 13. And so I just keep on telling him my entire life story about, how I'm going to, get back in school, and I'm not going to, whatever. And then the flight attendant comes by about 15 minutes into the flight with the beverage cart. And so I nudge this guy, and I'm like, hey, can you buy me some Jack? And he looks me straight in the eye, and he says, if you're going to change your life, why don't you start now? I was like, the audacity for this guy to tell me what to do with my life.
The way she told it in AA, this was yet another example of what an extreme case she was. A 13-year-old who's such a booze hound that she's bugging the guy next to her on a plane to buy her a drink. But notice, she asks for a glass of Jack Daniels, but she doesn't get it. She doesn't drink any Jack Daniels. This was actually one of the reasons Tina was a popular AA speaker. People would come up to her afterwards sometimes and say, thank you for not just getting up and telling a bunch of boring drinking stories. Here's another recording. Remember the glass of tequila?
I poured myself a big tumbler of tequila. I was drinking by myself, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was watching Sarah T., Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic, Linda Blair, and Mark Hamill.
The glass of tequila makes a big entrance, and then nothing happens with it. The rest of the story is about the TV show she was watching. When I asked Tina about the tequila, she told me, right, when she really thought back on it, she could only remember taking a few sips, and that was it. It was only when Tina started having the blasphemous thought in her head, should I take a drink, that she also began to seriously question how much she had drunk as a kid, really, what was true. For instance, that AA pamphlet with Tina's story in it. When Tina read it out loud during our interview, it was the first time she looked at the words she'd written in about 10 years.
Have you read this?
I haven't read it.
I love how alcohol affected me. It numbed all the torment in my brain. I had new friends, the older kids. I was cool finally. Very quickly, though, I started getting into trouble. When I was 11, I was put into what I assumed was a mental hospital. I was relieved to find out that I was crazy. Crazy is cool. I realized much later that the place was a rehab. When I read it, I see where I was mistaken.
What was mistaken was, first of all, the place was not a rehab for alcohol or drug abuse. It was psychiatric hospitalization to fix Tina's attitude. And second, she didn't remember loving how alcohol affected her. She didn't remember it numbing the torment in her brain. Maybe she was in denial or had forgotten, since it was so long ago, how alcohol made her feel. Which is why she now wanted to take a drink. She felt like she had to take a drink. This would be a referendum on her story. Was she an alcoholic or not? And if she wasn't an alcoholic, then what was true from the stories she'd been telling on stage all these years? She had to know. So she and her husband talked through when and how she would take her first drink.
Like, what happens if I get, drunk and everything falls apart, and it's horrible and whatever, and I am an alcoholic. And he's like, okay, we'll figure it out then. Okay. Then we'll deal with it. And I was like, and what if I'm not? He's like, okay, that's great. exact same conversation, I'm embarrassed to report, for about 9 months, probably every night.
Good for him.
I know, right? This is why.
Sounds like a stand-up guy.
Yeah, right? He's like, it's okay. And, he's like, you don't have to do it. You don't have to drink. Or if you want to, great.
I mean, I feel like, one of the indicators of not being an alcoholic is having kind of a casual take it or leave it relationship.
Yeah.
So
See, that's why I was an alcoholic. Because it was the mental obsession.
Right. So the fact that you're obsessively talking about should I? I mean, is that the reason that you were having the conversation over and over again? Because every time you had the conversation, that would reinforce the idea that you were an alcoholic, because here you are bringing it up again, and if you were not an alcoholic, you wouldn't need to be having this conversation as many times as you were.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right. So, and then the only way to get out of that is to really, let's do this. We go to a wine store on the way home. We pay for it, we go home. My husband makes pasta dish with chicken. He lights 2 candles, pours 2 glasses of wine. And so I take a little sip, and I say, it tastes like the 70s. Meaning I had tasted white wine before, but I was like 5. I was young. But I remembered that taste. That taste immediately came back to me. And then I tried to eat my meal, and it was, I didn't enjoy the taste. It was kind of like, it was really acidic.
Mm-hmm. And were you waiting?
Oh yeah. So I was like, when am I gonna want to go and do shots at the corner bar? Right? I mean, just